Oh, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'll call this reconvened meeting of the Standing Committee on City Finance and Services of March 3rd, 2020 to order. We acknowledge that we are on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We thank them for having cared for this land and look forward to working with them in partnership as we continue to build this great city together. I also want to take a moment to recognize the immense contributions of the City of Vancouver staff who work hard every day to help make our city an incredible place to live, work, and play. And some of those staff are here with us in chambers today, and others are not. They are working hard across the organization to make our city a better place. I would like to remind those attending council today regarding conduct in the public gallery. Please refrain from addressing council members without permission or applauding or otherwise interrupting a council member or speaker addressing council. Please also respect the directions of the chair so that we may create a respectful environment for council, the public, and staff present at today's meeting. Clerk, may we have the roll call, please?
Yes, Madam Chair. Mayor Stewart. Here. Councillor Carr. Here. Councillor DiGenova in the chair. Councillor Fry. Here. Councillor Swanson. Here. Councillor Hardwick. Councillor Wiebe. Councillor Boyle. Councillor Dominato. Here. Councillor Bly is on leave of absence for civic business. Councillor Kirby-Young. The meeting has quorum.
Thanks so much. So, Council, I'm going to go over the plan for this afternoon, and dare I say it, the evening. We will convene in Council first to deal with 3 items of urgent business, which are leaves of absence. Then we will have 2 items of business remaining on the Standing Committee agenda, items 9 and 10. Both of these are Council members' motions that have speakers to be heard, followed by debate and decision. Then we will convene in Council to deal with items 7 and 8 from this agenda, which were referred as unfinished business for debate and decision. Speakers were heard for these items on the 26th. We will recess for dinner from 5 to 6 p.m., and speakers should follow along on Twitter at Van City Clerk for updates on the progress of the meeting so they don't miss their turn to speak. Any comments on agenda items can be sent to Council using the web form on the city's website. The link to that form will be tweeted out if it has not already been tweeted out momentarily, and you can follow along at Van City Clerk. We will now convene in Council to deal with urgent business. Over to you, Mayor Stewart.
Thanks very much. We're going to reconvene in Council. Can I have the roll call, please?
So, Mayor Stewart in the chair, Councillor Carr, Councillor DiGenova, Councillor Fry, Councillor Swanson, Councillor Hardwick, Councillor Wiebe, Councillor Boyle, Councillor Dominato, Councillor Bly is on leave of absence for civic business, and Councillor Kirby-Young. The meeting has quorum.
Thanks very much. So we're going to deal with our first item of urgent business. It's a leave of absence for Councillor Bly for today. Can I have a mover? Thank you. Seconder, great. All in favor? Any opposed? That's passed. Thanks. The second is a leave of absence for personal reasons for Councillor Dominato for the hours of 3:45 to 6:15 today. We have a mover for that one. Thank you. Seconder. Thanks. All in favor? Any opposed? Passed. Last is a leave of absence for personal reasons for Councillor Dominato March 10th from 5 to 7 p.m. Can I have a mover? Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Hardwick. All in favor? Any opposed? That's passed too. Thanks very much. So Council is now recessed, and we'll reconvene in the Standing Committee meeting to continue with items. Yes? We need a motion for that one?
Privilege.
Point of privilege.
I had also submitted a leave of absence upcoming. You don't have that?
I don't have that.
Submitted? Or you don't have that provided?
I don't have
to
it on my sheet.
It's for the 12th. Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks. So we'll recess and now reconvene in the Standing Committee for dealing with items 9 and 10. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Mayor Stewart. We have 2 motions remaining on the agenda today. I'd like to remind everyone that we agreed that following the last speaker on the speakers list for each item, that we will go over the speakers list For people who were not present earlier and missed their turn to speak, that means they still had to be on the speakers list, and we'll give them the opportunity to speak. Before I begin, I would like to remind speakers that they have up to 5 minutes to make their comments, and they should state whether or not they are in support or opposition of the motion, and they may speak only once. Council members have up to 3 minutes to ask questions of speakers. However, speakers are under no obligation to respond. After hearing from speakers, we will go into discussion on the motion. I would like to remind committee members that their amendments must be submitted to the clerk in final written form before the member introduces them. Please ensure the clerk has received your amendment before it is your turn to speak. The first motion is item 9, universal no-cost coverage of prescription contraception, which was moved and introduced by Councillor Swanson and seconded by Councillor Boyle. We went through the speakers list once on February 26th, and I will now go over the speakers list. Those who were not present earlier. Is Nazanin Mogandami here? Thank you for joining us again. I know you spoke to another item.
Yes, I did.
At the last meeting. As I'd stated, you have up to 5 minutes, and the timer is to your right. I'll start it now.
Perfect. Thank you. So I am going to speak on this motion from a personal point of view and from the economic point of view. This is very important for me personally. I have a severe endometriosis. That's a condition that the lining of your uterus starts traveling and migrating to the other parts of your body. So every time I get my period, every time that every part of my body that has that lining gets inflamed. So for example, my intestines get inflamed, my nervous system gets inflamed. It's a horrible system. And I had to have surgery after medication. The only reason I can be standing up here right now because I'm on birth control oral prescription contraception daily, and I have a hormonal IUD. The cost of that is about $200 a month, and every 3 years I have to switch my IUD because of the concentrations of the hormones that my body needs to get to be able to just be functional and be able to stand upright. It's been going on for about 6 years. That's about $2,400 a year times 6 years until I get my menopause, hopefully one day, and then it will stop. That's a significant barrier, especially for someone who's living in Vancouver, which is a pretty expensive and unaffordable city to begin with. So that's my personal reason why I'm in favor of having this provincially covered. I don't have extended benefits. I'm self-employed, so I just have to cover the cost, and pharmacare is not accessible. On a larger scale, the reason why we think this campaign thinks that the provincial government needs to cover this is according to a survey, to a report. As of 2016, 60% of Canadian women have had an unplanned pregnancy. The cost of that for our province is huge, and Options for Sexual Health did a report that said for every dollar that is spent on reproductive health, the public expenditure saves $90. So for each dollar, there's $90 savings. Contraceptions are covered in UK, France, Spain, Sweden, Denmark, and Netherlands, Italy, and Germany, and Colorado. Ontario, just about a year ago, OHIP covers prescription up until age of 24, and they ruled it that people who have access to private insurance, they need to use their private insurance. And again, that creates a barrier for those who are under coverage for their parents, under their parents, and now the parents need to know that they're on birth control or contraception. Cost remains a huge barrier. Oral prescription contraception costs at least $20 a month. Again, for me, it's $200 a month because I'm on Visan, which is a specialized form of birth control. And for an IUD, which is the intrauterine device, that's a copper T-shape device that is put into the uterus, it costs about $75 to $400. So we would ask the council to consider passing this motion so that we can pressure the provincial government to consider it in their budget revisit or for the next budget. And we're hoping that if we get enough municipal support, Victoria has passed the motion to support that. We're working with other municipals too, so that the government, the provincial government would start and consider passing this and considering this. It stays a huge barrier, and going through special authorities is also not enough for this issue. So we're hoping that it will be covered under MSP, and hopefully they can get bulk prescription, whatever that they do with big pharmaceuticals. So I'm happy to answer your questions or answer your questions that I have answers to. Thank you.
Thanks. You do have questions from Councillor Dominato.
Sorry, that's a holdover from before.
Councillor Boyle, questions?
Thanks, and thanks for being here. I'm wondering if you can just speak a bit to like income disparity and why this would be a barrier for some people more than others, and what it would mean for it to be universal.
So this is especially important for low-income folks, people of color, people living in rural areas. Those are the people who are more likely to living or working precariously and not have access to extended benefits. Also, lower income or more precarious education and understanding of how birth control works or contraceptions, and having this would make a huge difference for them. Also, having that provincially covers, we hypothesize that would be making it more accessible in the rural communities, because pharmacies will have more of a stash of it rather than by order. So I think once we have more accessibility, the consumption of it will increase, and that would be beneficial. But folks with, with lower education, with lower income, they're much more less likely to access birth control. Did that answer your question?
That's all my question, just thinking through that. Thanks.
Yeah.
Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if there's any other, you mentioned some, Victoria had approved of it. Are there any other groups that have approved of it, or have you been taking it to different groups?
Not yet. I think Saanich is considering it. Vancouver, you're considering it. Burnaby, they passed it through their social committee, and it's going to their council soon. Port Coquitlam is considering it. And I think that's it for now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That's all your questions?
Yep.
Councillor Swanson. Councillor Wiebe. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wiebe. Let me just pop you back on the queue there. Go ahead. I don't know why. I'll reset your timer there. Go ahead.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for speaking. One of the things is that the cost, you say the upfront cost, the $700. Have you looked at how much, if this goes and we get a larger economies of scale or bring in different kind of products that can reduce the cost, how much it would save the provincial government? Like, have we looked at what the economics are?
I think I might have access to that data. I'm not sure.
Okay, because I think obviously this is something that, if done correctly, could be an economic driver in the sense that it could really increase the equity of access. And then second question would be on the prescription contraception, sometimes the emergency ones and other ones that people need depending on their situation. Do you think those would be included in the current context of the motion?
So there is a medication. I don't have the number for the saving, so the total saving for the province, but there is a number for that.
Okay.
Which we're actually hoping for more conversation about this happening once this hits the provincial government.
Okay.
But there is, I'm going to look up because it's a medical name, mifegymiso. That's an abortion pill.
Yep.
And that started to be covered. The cost is $300, so that was a big barrier. That's an emergency abortion pill that became available and folks can get it at no cost at the pharmacist. So
That
I
is
think
currently covered.
it's currently covered. It was passed about 3 years ago. So that has been proven to be much more successful, and we're hoping to get to a place that we don't have to deal with abortions altogether and abortion care or unplanned pregnancy care altogether.
Perfect. Thank you very
Did
much.
that answer your question?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Thanks, Councillor Weeb. That's all your questions? Okay. And that's all the questions for you. Thank you for coming. So council, is there any discussion on this? Councillor Boyle.
Thanks. I just thought I would very briefly say, as is clear, this is a advocacy motion on an issue that impacts many of our residents, and it's about addressing a historic inequity between people who have penises and people who have uteruses in terms of access to prescription contraception. And this is a council that has again and again cared about and supported issues of gender equity. And so I hope we can add our voice to this as one part of that work.
Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, what she said. Plus, in terms of equity, it's involves economic equity. So giving low-income people the same access to what higher-income people can afford to pay for. So I hope we can pass it unanimously.
Councillor Weeb.
I'm very supportive, and I'm appreciative of Councillor Swanson bringing it to the table. This is something that my mother's been very involved in trying to facilitate ways to make it accessible for more women in the province, and I think that this is something that this council supports, so I will be supportive.
Thanks. See no one else on the queue. Council, did you want to vote on screen? I'm calling the vote. Please vote on screen. Councillor Dominato and Councillor Ply is absent. So if we can mark her as absent. Okay, and that passes with unanimous support. Pardon? Why, did I hear a point of something? Oh, so, council members, I don't know how sometimes it shows up and sometimes it doesn't on the screen. It really is magic. I just want you to know that. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. I suppose it depends who pushes the button or how, but it was not my intention to pull it down ahead of time, just to be efficient. Okay, so now we are on to our next motion, which is the last motion, which is item 10, unintended consequences, reconsideration of a council direction that may affect housing in the city of Vancouver, which was moved and introduced by myself and seconded by Councillor Dominato. At this point, I'm going to relinquish the chair to Vice Chair Fry so that I may participate in discussion. And because there are speakers to this, I just ask Council to bear with us for a couple of minutes while we change over seats, because I think that it's probably proper to have him in the chair. So thanks, Council. We're just recessed for a couple of minutes, but please stay in your chairs.
All right, folks, we're just getting ready to reconvene. I do want to point out that on that last vote, it was brought to my attention that the screen erroneously recorded Councillor DeGenova in opposition to the motion. In fact, it was passed unanimously, and just want to clear that up for the record. So the unintended consequences, the universal no-cost coverage of prescription contraception was unanimously passed, despite what the screen may have showed us. Okay, so I think I'm looking to Councillor DeGenova for a thumbs up if we're still waiting. All right. The last motion is item 10, unintended consequences, reconsideration of a council direction that may affect housing in the city of Vancouver, which was moved and introduced by Councillor DeGenova and seconded by Councillor Dominato. At this point, Councillor Chair DeGenova has relinquished the chair to me, Vice Chair Fry, so that she can participate in the discussion. We'll now hear from speakers on this motion, and our first speaker is Sarah Sagai. Speaker number one, Sarah Sagai. Speaker number one, Sarah Sagai. Okay, well, we'll just move down the list. I don't actually see anybody in the foyer there either, so. The next speaker is speaker number two, Jen Efting. Speaker number two, Jen Efting. Speaker number two cannot make it. Okay. Speaker number three, Sue Robinet, tenant organizer with the Vancouver Tenants Union. Speaker number two, Sue Robinet. Speaker number three. Sue Robinet, speaker number three. Speaker number four has withdrawn. Speaker number five is Carol Korm. Speaker number five, Carol Korm. Speaker number five, Carol Korm. Oh, well, there's... All right. Speaker number six, Sarah Lindsay. Speaker number six, Sarah Lindsay. Speaker number six, Sarah Lindsay. Speaker number seven, Elizabeth Blackwood. Speaker number seven, Elizabeth Blackwood. Speaker number seven, Elizabeth Blackwood. Speaker number eight, Claire Lomas, and I believe we got an email from Ms. Lomas. Speaker number eight, Claire Lomas. Speaker number eight, Claire Lomas. Speaker number nine, Edgar A. Oviedo. Speaker number nine, Edgar A. Oviedo. Speaker number nine, Edward A. Oviedo. Speaker number 10, Blanca Luthi. Blanca Luthi, speaker number 10. Speaker number 10, Blanca Luthi. Well, folks, that is it for our list of speakers. I don't actually see... Sure, Councillor DeGenova, let me just bring you up there.
As per the pilot that we have with the new procedure bylaw, are we not required to read through the list twice?
Yeah, I'm just also sort of scanning the room, and I'm about to read through the list twice. But, yeah. All right, so I will do a final read through this list. Speaker number one, Sarah Sagai. Speaker number three, Sue Robinet, tenant organizer from the Vancouver Tenants Union. Speaker number five, Carol Korm. Speaker number six, Sarah Lindsay. Speaker number seven, Elizabeth Blackwood. Speaker number eight, Claire Lomas. Speaker number nine, Edgar A. Oviedo. Speaker number 10, Blanca Luthi. All right. Well, it would appear that we have no speakers present. Councillor DiGenova, are you on the queue to speak? All right. So we'll now do discussion.
Thanks so much. I actually cannot pull my email up here. I'm trying to do this. Just bear with me a moment. I'm trying to do it on my phone since I can't pull my email up here on this computer. Maybe I could start with a point of information,
Sure.
if I may, Vice Chair Fry?
Yes, please.
Through you to staff, if you deem it appropriate, I was just hoping that staff could clarify for me. Right now, without this vote of reconsideration, it would mean that there would not be broad public consultation prior to a referral report on this. Is that correct? Could I just clarify that?
Yeah, through me to the city manager. I'm wondering, city manager, if you could reflect on that perspective and question. So I believe, to paraphrase, or you've got it.
Yeah, thanks. At this point, we are undertaking the other work that was called for in producing more rental in the C2 zones, so that work's underway. If without this motion, the consultation would largely be of the property owners impacted, which is about 300 property owners who would be effectively downzoned, and we'd need to engage with each of them. So I don't think we would be planning on doing broad community consultation, but we would be needing to engage with those that are impacted. And it is a very considerable amount of work that it would be required, and would most certainly divert us from the other housing work that we currently have on our work plans.
Thanks. I just had another point of information through you, Vice Chair Fry, to the city manager, and that is, right now, as I read it, there is, without staff bringing us their own recommendations and report, that there is one direction only that would be considered a referral. Is that correct? And then the second part of this is, does this also include nonprofit societies that own these buildings? So that's a question through you.
No, I see the city manager rising to it.
So C2 zones contain a relatively low share of the city's older existing rental stock. I think we've already talked about this. There are about 377 purpose-built rental buildings containing 3,000 rental units, representing 4% of the rental units in the city. So that's, it could be that some of those are owned by nonprofits. It's at this point we haven't done the work to assess that, and I'm not sure off the top of my head how many of those might be nonprofits. Those are largely, there's rental units above commercial and whatnot.
Okay.
Thank you, city manager.
Thanks very much. And I'm again having technical difficulties here, but trying my very best at the same time to send this over to council through the proper process. But I have an amendment that I'd like to add and would like to be considered. And that is something I'm sending in now. Just, sorry, bear with me. I have to use my phone because I had it all set up on my desktop, but it didn't come over here when I changed over computers. So it's an addition of a third paragraph.
Okay, Councillor, I'm going to move us over to an amendment queue. Councillor Dominato, that's a holdover, yeah?
Yeah, I am on the main queue for a point
Yeah,
of information.
but Councillor DiGenova to her amendment.
Thanks so much. I was really hoping that we could hear from the public in consultation, as we all understand, and it's very clear in the quasi-judicial body that we sit in public hearing. It's very important that we follow the process, and the process does not allow us for consultation outside of the correspondence that we can receive during the proper and appropriate time periods after referral, and the consultation ahead of time is already shared in the referral report. So what I understand from our city manager is in fact that really we'd be moving forward with one option, which would be considerable funding and amount of money. And if this isn't in order, I would hope that there would be some consideration for what was, because I did go to staff with my intention. My intention isn't to overturn what Councillor Swanson's bringing forward. It's just to make sure that we consider consultation and everything moving forward, so that we consider all options that might even better protect renters. I know that we certainly have some experts on our housing staff, so that's what I'm trying to do. I think that it would be good to come to referral with Councillor Swanson's option, as well as a number of other options as well. And I understand that this could be considerable work, but I understand it's already considerable work, and there's been, there's been concern, not only to renters, but to nonprofit organizations as well. So I think that it's incumbent upon us to undertake the proper consultation ahead of time. And I'm concerned about amendments at public hearing, because we can't go out and consult on them. We have to make decisions here on the fly, and I just don't support that process. So for that reason, I'm putting this amendment forward.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Boyle to the amendment.
Thanks. I'm wondering, through you as chair, if we can get a ruling on whether this amendment is in order. It seems to me both that it conflicts with the first clause in the motion itself, and that it is an issue we have already previously voted on, that it would be might be frivolous within the language. That's feels like a judgy word, but within the language. So I'm hoping we could get a ruling on whether this amendment is in order.
Okay, I'm going to hold that thought for a second and just move us to, we'll take a quick 2-minute recess so I can, that's all right with everybody? Well, in possibly what was one of the shortest breaks to refer to an item that is in or out of order, I'm going to rule that is out of order. Thanks, Councillor Boyle. Did you have anything else on the amendment? Or I guess we're clearing that, so. I'm sorry, Councillor Boyle, I totally shut you off there. We are back on the main queue. Councillor DeGenova, to the unamended motion.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to check through you a point of information either to the clerk or the city manager. It's my understanding when we have a vote of reconsideration, we reconsider the vote. So it's a vote to reconsider our vote. And then we would vote again on the actual item that we're reconsidering. So we'd have an option. So we need a vote to reconsider the vote, and then we have to actually reconsider it. So I'm wondering if it would be in order during that process. So if the vote passed to reconsider the vote, if I then could add that. And if so, that would be my intention of doing so. And the reason for that would be, I just wanted to be very clear that when it came to the First Amendment, I voted against it and I stated my reasons why. But after a long 7-hour plus agenda item here where we had great democratic debate and process, I accidentally voted in opposition and have for many months been looking for a way forward to record my vote in favor. Others want to record their vote the same way. That's why I'm asking for a vote of reconsideration. So I'm hoping that we can reconsider the vote, and it's my understanding that then we would vote again on the actual amendment that was passed. Is that correct, Chair Fry?
I'm in consulting with the clerk and the city manager. It reflected that this wouldn't be in order, so I don't see how it would be further in order even after the reconsideration.
No, I'm asking about my actual motion. So I
Oh,
understand.
your reconsideration motion is in order, yes.
No, I understand that is, but I'm asking if a reconsideration, the very first part of it, would mean we vote again on the actual amendment. Is that correct?
Your amendment that we just ruled out of order?
No, the amendment that Councillor Swanson brought forward that I'm asking to be reconsidered. If a vote of reconsideration passed, would that be the case?
I'm honestly losing you to a bit of semantics here.
So I
Actually,
understand there
I
are
see
two
that-
votes in a vote of reconsideration. A vote as to whether or not council will allow us to reconsider, and then if that passes, then a vote on that. Is that correct?
I'm going to just refer to our clerk for one moment.
Thanks. Okay. Reconsider. Then we vote again. It's reconsideration. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, folks, for bearing with me. So, Councillor DeGenova, your motion as presented is a rescission, not a reconsideration. So, in the event that your rescission motion succeeds, then this entire original Councillor Swanson amendment disappears completely.
Point of information.
Sure.
So I came to staff and I asked staff the best way to put forward through our procedural bylaw reconsideration. So it was my understanding that this was the only way forward. So was there something else I could have done? Because it was not listed in the staff comments to me.
Honestly, Councillor DeGenova, I couldn't speak to that previous conversation.
I'm asking you to ask staff to speak to that.
Well, staff, I just spoke to staff, and they reflected that this is a rescission, not a reconsideration. And
Okay.
so, as such, this motion, should your motion succeed, it completely eliminates this.
So
City
then
manager has something to say.
I would just-
I'm gonna hold you for 1 second as the city manager has something to say.
Thanks. Yeah, just to clear up any misunderstanding, a reconsideration can be done in the same day of that original vote. So if you wanted to do a reconsideration, it would have needed to have happened that day. If you want to revisit that vote in the future meetings or in the past for a past vote, it needs to be a rescission, which is what I believe is in the motion that's before you now.
Okay, and sorry, another point of information then. If the second part that doesn't ask for rescission is in the motion, how is that in order and on the council agenda if we were doing more than rescinding the motion?
I will ask the city manager, actually, if that is in order, if the second part of this motion is therefore in order. The original proposed motion that Councillor DeGenova submitted, and that council directs staff to continue to monitor the rental housing stock in C2, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I believe that the motion that is before you today, separate from the newly amended language, if there were a rescission, then the second part would come into force, which would tell us to monitor the C2 zone. So those two are not in conflict with each other.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to advance the queue then to Councillor Dominato.
I had a question which I just passed to Councillor Kirby-Young, but I'll, sorry, trying to just go to the door to get my kids. Just the question I have is a point of information through you to the city manager, and it was just with respect to the consultation requirement. And this goes back to the November report where staff had indicated a move in this direction would require consultation with landowners on a potential new rental replacement requirement. And it talks about development rights without consultation. I'm just curious if there's any legal liability with respect to moving ahead without consultation, and whether we would be possible kind of open ourselves up to lawsuits or anything of that kind if we were to proceed without any of that consultation prior to public hearing. And then I'll listen to the answer, and then I unfortunately have to go.
And so you're asking me to ask the city manager this?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks. Through the chair, obviously, when we get to issues of liability, we go in camera, so I'll stay high level. But staff, as I said earlier in my answer, staff would not bring anything forward without engaging with each of the 377 owners. You're effectively downzoning them by doing this. You're taking their land value, and so we would need to engage with every one of those. It's at least 6 months for multiple people on our staff to do that. It's a very significant amount of work. That's why I've raised this concern many times with council, because that will pull us away from other work that is in our affordable housing portfolio. And as we've assessed all those properties that I mentioned, the 3,000 rental units, we believe less than 20% of those sites are actually redevelopable. And so we're talking all of this work for up to 200 units that would be impacted by this. And so it's just, when we look at kind of our overall level of effort to protect this number of units, it seems disproportionate. So that's kind of why staff did not recommend proceeding with this in the first place.
Okay. Thank you to the chair and city managers, because I have to go pick up my kids. I did just want to reflect on that point then, is that what I'm hearing then is that that at the end of the day, going forward with this further consultation would take away from some of the priority work that this council has already endorsed around creating new rental supply and other protections that they've been working on, including the renter's office and other things like that. And so that's what I'm hearing the city manager say, and that and I gather there was some scoping work they articulated in the report that would be flowing in future months. But I think that answers my question, and hopefully I reflected the city manager's comments correctly. But now I understand that was why it was not recommended at the time in November, was because some of those concerns. And
yeah, thanks. I just want to make sure I wasn't speaking in regards to today's motion. I was talking about the reason we originally didn't recommend pursuing this.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dominato. Councillor Boyle.
Thanks. I also had a clarifying question through you, Chair, to staff around the second part of the second clause of the motion, which is just wanting to know what of that monitoring is already happening as part of our broader housing work, and what of monitoring that rental stock would be new. Are we doing that? Is it work we're not yet doing? Seems worth doing. The second clause of the motion asking staff to monitor the rental housing stock in C2 areas. I guess my question is just, are we already monitoring that?
Well, we're monitoring rental across the entire city, but short of this amendment, we don't have a considerable effort underway in the C2. I've already said it's a very small amount of the rental stock in the city, and when you do the economic analysis, as we've been doing for the last few weeks, as I've already said, there's not a ton of benefit for like 80% of the C2, the rental in C2, to redevelop. So it's a very small number. It's 200 to 300. So it's not a heavy lift to monitor them, okay. And but it's not currently being planned to do that.
Okay, that's helpful. And while I have the floor, Chair, I'm just going to ask that we sever the two clauses in this motion and vote separately on the first and second. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Boyle. Councillor Kirby-Young.
Thank you. I just want to follow up on a question through you to staff, and then I will have a proposed amendment I'll ask the Chair's guidance on. And that is really whether or not, through the Chair to staff, they feel that this moving forward without any change to the previous policy, the previous council vote to include this and go straight to public hearing would hinder their work? And will it inhibit building of new rental housing? And do you have any sense of how many new units that we could build to deliver much needed supply and overcome our less than 1% vacancy rate?
I'm going to suggest that's a very high threshold question for the city manager, but he's a pretty clever fellow, so we'll see.
Thank you, sir, for the compliment. I think I'm up for the task. I hope so. Just to address immediately your amendment, I just want to be clear, we can't reconsider something from a past council meeting. And as I said, we originally didn't recommend pursuing this because of the extensive level of effort that would be required to engage with each of those landowners. And so the team generally haven't recommended pursuing this because we think the level of effort could be better invested to produce additional rental elsewhere in the city and to pursue other policies that have been recommended by council.
Okay, so
And I can't say how much that level of effort from staff might produce for other rental.
quick follow-up proportionally, would it be fair to say then level of magnitude we could achieve an impactful number of new rental units that would make a material difference in our housing strategy?
I think the staff believe that level of effort could be spent and preserve many more rental units through other efforts than this will preserve.
Okay, thank you. And then question to the chair, because I have an amendment. I understand that we can't reconsider the vote, but I'm wondering if I can do a strike and replace at this point of the 2 paragraphs that I have sent in to the clerk procedurally, if that would be in order with the 2 paragraphs that I have emailed in, and that would be the last 2 that start with "and that" and the "furthermore."
I'm sorry, so you'd like to strike and replace the last 2 of the 3 paragraphs?
I think we're striking and replacing the motion as it stands at this point. I'm looking for guidance because what I'd like to do is have council consider through the most appropriate procedural means these 2 paragraphs, since we are not able to consider in the first paragraph of the motion as submitted has been ruled out of order.
Okay, I'm sorry. So just for clarification, you're talking about your amendment that you've submitted. Sorry, 1 second.
Correct.
You're talking about your amendment. So we haven't moved to an amendment queue yet, but you're...
We should do that now then.
Okay, and I'm going to just quickly acknowledge Councillor DeGenova's point of procedure as I move us to an amendment queue. Councillor DeGenova. Yeah. Can I get the mic to work on? Here you go, Councillor DeGenova.
Thanks so much. I understood that the only thing that was out of order was the addition in the bold that I'd sent over, and that the other 2 paragraphs were in order. So that's my understanding. My understanding is if I wanted to bring something forward back, or anyone else did, that stated what was in the 3rd paragraph, that it would have to come as a completely separate motion, and that it actually could be go beyond the extensive work that staff are already undertaking. That being said, I'm just asking for clarification on that. The first 2 paragraphs that start with "therefore be it resolved that," and then "and that" are in order. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Councillor, sorry, now Councillor
My time.
Young, can you add yourself to the...
You were on.
Okay. Councillor Kirby-Young, we're on the amendment queue.
Point of procedure, if I might.
Sure.
Just clarification, because for my own benefit, I'm trying to follow along, and I think this is a little complex procedurally. But I understood that the rescission, per the comment from the city manager earlier, needed to be handled on the day of the meeting, and the first paragraph of the motion as submitted says...
No, the reconsideration would have had to take place on the day of the meeting.
Correct. So
the rescission is in order.
Could you clarify, let me ask the question a different way, what is still in order on the floor that council is considering? I'm not clear.
The rescission is in order. The 2nd paragraph is in order. The proposed amendment from Councillor DeGenova was out of order.
Okay.
And the amendment that you suggested to reconsider is also out of order.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And the clerk informs me that we can't make amendments to rescissions. So,
I'm wondering.
on that note, I'm going to just clear this queue entirely and back to the main queue. And Councillor Kirby-Young, you are still on the main queue.
So if we are now currently speaking to the motion that we have on the floor, which is the 2 paragraphs as submitted, looking for affirmation, then I would, based on what we have heard from the city manager, I would encourage council to consider it in the spirit that the intent of this motion is not to not protect the housing stock. It is to figure out how to protect and ensure we have proper public consultation, but we also don't compromise our housing goals to build significantly more rental housing. So I realize that there might be a bit, because we're in a bit of a procedural place at the moment, a bit of trust and anticipation involved in us having the ability to have a future motion come forward. But I think given the fact that we want to make good policy, I don't think that making significant changes at public hearing is the best way to do it. We have limited tools to maneuver procedurally there. I do think we want to have really fulsome conversations around significant public policy that strikes the appropriate balance between protecting those units and making sure that we can deliver on much needed additional rental housing stock in the city. And we do it in a way that really does enable people to have a voice, and that's pivotally and critically renters, but also the folks that are those property owners we also need to work with in order to deliver additional rental housing stock. I'm also concerned about potential liability to the city manager's earlier comment around we're effectively downzoning. So to me, this is an example of not good procedure. It's not an example of actually a disparity of goals. It's more around the fact that I think procedurally we've put ourselves in a very awkward situation, and I'd like to see us deal with this through another motion where we can actually meet the intent of what the original amendment during the public hearing was. Those are my comments. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Councillor Kirby-Young. Councillor Hardwick.
Thank you. It seems to me that we're missing the point why this motion or the amendment was put forward in the first place, and that was because there had been a quantum loss of affordable rentals in C2 zones. And I think the intent was to stop the bleeding. So I've been listening to the back and forth in this, and it seems to me that this is exactly the kind of issue that would be discussed broadly with the public in the Vancouver plan going forward. You talk about fulsome conversations. Well, that's really exactly what's supposed to be happening as part of this larger process. So I'm not persuaded at this point that an extra lot of work would necessarily have to be set aside and to deal with 200 to 300 units, which could be easily identified as part of the larger process.
Thanks, Councillor Hardwick. Councillor Carr.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair, I do have some questions to staff. My first question is, given the statement that you just made, Vice Chair Fry, that the clerk informed you that a amendment to or additional language regarding rescinding motion is not in order, it does put into my mind the question of whether or not the second paragraph, which is not a rescission but a totally different replacement idea, is that in order? Or is it just only in order to do the rescission, which is the therefore be it resolved part of this motion that was submitted?
No, in discussion with the clerk and the city manager, we consider this in order.
It is.
Yeah.
So it's just, okay, so you can rescind and replace with language, but now you can't amend any of that. Am I right
Correct,
on that process?
Yeah.
Okay. My second question, also through you, Vice Chair Fry, to staff, is a question around the consultation process and the concern raised by the city manager that if this rescission doesn't happen and the original amendment to the motion that was passed by council stands, that there would need to be consultation with the 377 property owners. And I'm wondering if we would not be under obligation to also consult with the renters in those buildings.
That sounds like an excellent question for our city manager, and I'll ask the city manager if we would be indeed consulting with property owners and renters as part of that process.
I don't know the answer to that. I'm happy to check with the staff and get back to you. I do know because it's actually a downzoning, we would need to engage with the property owners. I'm not sure to what extent we'd be more broadly consulting with tenants and interested community members. Obviously, this would come back as part of a public hearing, so the members of the public could come and speak to it. But we normally, when we bring something to council for a referral, we will have done broader public consultation as well as to those directly impacted. That broader consultation wouldn't take place in this case.
Okay, thank you. And I have a third question, and that question is regarding the public consultation process. And I'm wondering if we had a motion that was passed by council that does include a referral to public hearing of elements of that motion, and is the only process around public consultation prior to the staff reporting back to us on the with a referral report to public hearing, or was there any public consultation prior to the report that we received? And if there is a necessity for consultation now prior to a referral report landing on our desks, who does get consulted with, given that report has RS zones and RT zones throughout the whole city and C zones throughout the whole city?
Okay, so I'm following your question. I think that is a question for the city manager, but as I understand it, you're referring to two different things. So we have the work that was done on this, the work done by staff on the RT and RS zones, and then the amendment as moved by Councillor Swanson that council instructs staff to prepare a report for consideration for referral to public hearing to amend the rental housing stock official development plan to extend rental replacement requirements to C2, C26, C2B, and C2B1 zoning districts citywide. Now, I'm going to ask the city manager, but I do believe that that's a separate direction now, separate from the work that was done on this original rental report. Now, if I understand your question correctly, though, you're asking if there would be an option for reporting back prior to this going to public hearing. Is that
my question? Really is driving at the issue of consultation that on that motion, which was passed by council, which the city manager said staff had concerns about because of the amendment that was done to the amendment, which I think it was Amendment K, that all of a sudden that amendment would have required additional or more consultation. And I'm just wondering what the comparison is in terms of how much consultation was intended to go forward as is regarding, without even this amendment, but how much was going on. I don't understand how much more additional consultation and with whom needs to happen regarding the motion as the original motion as is, without any rescinding, versus with rescinding. How much extra work is there? Like, in other words,
K
how
or
much work
without
we're
K is basically what you're asking.
Yeah.
Okay, city manager. So K was Councillor Swanson's original amendment.
Oh, yes. Okay,
which
gotcha.
we're now addressing today. So
the amendment that was added against the staff recommendation is a very considerable level of extra work. That's been my primary concern the day we considered this. You know, when we bring something forward, like in that rental report where this got added, there's, a year worth of consultation that led it each of those recommendations. And each of the components of that, we consulted with the stakeholders and the broader public about those recommendations. And so we did that work. Out of that work, we recommended not adding this amendment for the reason because that was the results of that review in terms of the extent that it would protect a larger number of units for the level of effort to produce it. That's why we didn't recommend it. So we did consult on the pieces that we brought forward, and we hadn't intended to do this work. And just to be really clear, if we do this work now, the 6 months worth of work to implement this, it will pull staff away from other things. And the two other things are this new EHT money, the $25 million, that's the same team that would otherwise be implementing the CHIP program, which is the Community Housing Investment Program to deepen affordability. So it's the same staff, and they were working on that, and the Community Serving Spaces Program. Those are the two pieces that will be slower as a result of needing to do this work. And so it's a limited number of staff, and they're all kind of working on the same projects. And so that's my concern for achieving deeper levels of affordability and having the same team stretched.
So just to be clear, then you're saying that the K work plan can't be considered separately from the work that's already been done.
I'm not sure I'm saying exactly that. What I'm saying is that we did considerable consultation for the recommendations that we brought forward for the rental report that was passed in the fall, at which time this amendment was added. So we did a lot of that consultation before we brought that report forward. We hadn't contemplated doing the work that's called for through the amendment K.
Okay.
Which is a considerable level of effort, as I've said.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Councillor Carr, you're kind of out of time, so I'm going to move on to Councillor Swanson. Councillor Swanson.
So just procedurally here, are we just in a phase of asking questions, or are we supposed to be speaking for or against the motion and having a vote fairly soon?
You could speak for or against the motion and have a vote fairly soon.
So I'd like to ask through you a question of the manager. So are you saying that it's a legal requirement for the city to consult with property owners who may experience a loss of property value, but it's not a legal requirement to consult with tenants who, if the property isn't downzoned and they get evicted, will probably be experiencing higher rents?
Our plan for consultation would be to engage with the property owners, the 377 property owners whose values would be decreased through this, as well as to host 2 open houses, at which time tenants and the public would be welcome to come and share their perspective. So we would look to engage through property owners as well as the broader public.
But is it a legal requirement?
If we want to talk about legal issues, I'd like to go in camera. I'm just telling you what we'd be planning to do.
Okay, so I'm going to stick up for this original amendment here. I'm just thinking of who it will impact. So say you've got a building on an arterial, and it's got a couple stores on the bottom and a few rental units on top. And this amendment that I made that we passed comes along and says, if you redevelop this into, say, a 6-story building, you have to put 3 or 4, you have to replace the rental units. You could put condos in too, you could put businesses in too, but you'd have to replace the rental units. So what that does is it gives the tenants a little more protection, if there's tenants there now, because it won't be quite as profitable to evict them and build something else. Now, is this happening? It happened at Carolina and Broadway. It's happening at McDonald and 4th. It could happen at a place on U Street where I've been working with the tenants. It is a key issue. Now, one of the things here that people are saying is we have to have we have to make sure we don't have a net loss of rental units. Well, I'm sorry, but building new rental units that are expensive is not the same as saving older rental units that are a little bit affordable. It's not just about the net gain or loss, it's about affordability. Landlord BC And UDI have been lobbying us about this. They've been sending us emails, they've been meeting with us, they prepared a nice little PowerPoint for us. And I think it's really important for us to, I think this vote is going to basically say who's running City Hall. And I think it's really important, and I think we need to stick up for the tenants.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Swanson. Councillor DeGenova, you have a little over a minute left.
Thanks very much. I believe because I'm the mover of the motion, I get an extra 5 minutes to close on my motion as well.
It seems that the clock goes at 3, but okay. I'll give you an extra 3.
No, that was my opening, and then I get 5 minutes to close on my motion. That's my understanding, but I wanted to speak to some of the things that have been said. I really tried, and I tried to do that in the amendment that was called out of order, and I hope that Councillor Swanson will notice that I did ask for consultation, not only with landowners, which I know is legal, but also for consultation with renters, and consultation with nonprofits, and consultation with community. Perhaps that means people who don't live in our city right now but can't afford to or were pushed out. Perhaps that's people who want to live in certain neighborhoods but can't afford to right now because they're waiting for us to increase the rental stock. So I look at the unintended consequences of some of council's decisions, and I'm a part of that too. I think we all are. So I don't think it's about who's running City Hall. I think it's about how are we working to move forward the goals for rental housing. And I think that when we look at the renter's office, that's really important. But it's also important to make sure that not only are we protecting rental stock, and maybe there's ways to do that through heritage, through character, and other ways, but we, in moving forward with this one very singular decision, it's very clear in the way this is going to public hearing. It's not, how would you like to see rental proceed in C2? It's, this is what we're going to public hearing with. It's this recommendation that staff are being told to come to us with. So it's not actually a staff recommendation, and it doesn't come to us the same way. So, Councillor Swanson, I was very encouraged when you and I voted together on the first budget here of this council to move forward with affordable housing and move CACs over for that. And my reputation, I pride myself on my work to make sure that not only have I contributed to rental housing, and that's what inspired me to run for council, but also that it's the most affordable rental, even for those who don't have a penny more, or I guess now it's a nickel more than those on social assistance. So for that reason, I think it's very important that we do respect what's in our housing strategy. And the Housing Vancouver strategy is very clear on that. It says that we are going to try and increase rental housing, and that could possibly mean units already in our affordable rental stock that are included in Housing Vancouver. But I'm really concerned if this is going to hit us and hurt our goals of providing more housing, because I've seen the consequences of that, not only here at City Council, but across our region. So for that reason, I hope that there can be some good faith here. And just as, I'm a little bit concerned that, we declare everything an emergency and then nothing becomes an emergency anymore. But I, in good faith, voted with you on that because I think it's important. And I'd hope that overall that we would trust our staff. We would look at our staff's direction, which I understand this motion supports our staff and their housing strategy. And that's all I'm trying to do. The language is legal. Unfortunately, I'm locked into that.
Councillor, I gave you a little extra time there, so.
8 minutes?
No, there was an error, but you're now
But I got to close on my motion?
You want to do it all now?
I was close. I
okay,
thought
sure.
I was. Were there people on the queue after me?
There are, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was the only person on the queue. I thought we were on the main queue.
You're not anymore.
Yes, I just wanted to share that that's why. And I'm hoping I won't have to speak to it again, but really wanting council to understand the reason I was bringing this forward.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kirby-Young.
I have a Point of procedure.
Yes.
To help inform the conversation. I'm not suggesting I'll do it right this moment, but I've been studying the procedure bylaw and pursuant to section 8.135. Is it correct that council can amend an adopted motion? A reconsideration has to happen at the same council meeting. A rescission happens subsequently, but council does have the ability to amend a previously passed motion. Is that correct?
Sorry, I don't have a copy of the procedure bylaw in front of me, so I'll ask you to just run me by that one more time. 8.135. I'm going to check with the clerk.
Okay.
We'll take a quick timeout. All right, folks. I'm going to give you the mic. With regard to, I believe, what your question is and your what I see as your amendment proposed, it is possible to amend this in your first enactment clause, yes, we can amend it, and yes, we could adopt additional clauses. However, the third clause would be out of order because it's too far out in scope and it would be out of order with the rest of this motion. Now, if you were to supply something a little bit more simple, a simpler enactment clause as the third, for instance, directing staff to report back on the impacts of what this might look like, that is not quite as prescriptive, that would be in order. However, the third enactment clause, as you proposed, would be out of order. But you can replace rescind with amend.
Or follow-up question, council could consider the two clauses that are on the floor based on the intent of what the discussion is here today also.
Without the third enactment clause that's been proposed as amendment? Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay. Sure. Councillor DiGenova.
Under the same section of this procedure bylaw, then should my original amendment not be reconsidered because it technically was an amendment of the original policy? The third paragraph that I sent in was an amendment of the original policy that came after the rescission vote.
That's correct, but your original motion was a rescind, and so the motion to rescind would have negated anything that came after it, except for the enactment clause 2. The enactment clause 3 would not have been in order because essentially we've negated the original motion.
So, Vice Chair Fry, another point of order would be, then why did I receive advice that I could not do that before this came to council, considering the changes we've made to the procedure bylaw and the fact that I did put this in at the staff process?
Councillor, I couldn't speak to any advice you may have received outside of these council chambers, and it is possible because this is a kind of complex juggling that we're doing here with procedure bylaws. So it could be that you were given erroneous advice, but honestly, I can't speak to what advice you may have received in private correspondence.
With staff.
With staff, correct.
It came through our staff comments process to all of council. Okay.
Okay, sorry, it was not under my watch though. So, Councillor Kirby-Young, are you still on the queue to speak, or you'll wait? Councillor Swanson.
So can you tell me where we are now? Did Councillor Kirby-Young's amendment happen?
No, it did not.
Okay.
Councillor Kirby-Young has clarified, though, that in fact it is possible to amend a past moved motion. However, the new enactment clause number 3, the furthermore that, would be out of order as it was written today.
So what's on the floor is the rescindment and the directing staff to continue to monitor.
Currently, yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to make one more point, which is that one of the criticisms of the original amendment was that it would lower property values, and actually that's...
Actually, hey, Councillor Swanson, I hate to cut you off, but we have some breaking news, and I don't want you to squander your time. So we'll take a quick 5 minutes recess, if that's all right with everybody, and we're going to consult with the clerk's office. I don't want to squander your time. right, folks, we're ready to bring things back. All right, folks, we're going to try and bring this all back to order. So, folks, before we, maybe I'll wait for a few more of the councilors to enter the room. Before we re-engage this conversation, we did have a pretty high-level meeting with our city's legal team and a number of clerks to go over the procedure bylaws. So, contrary to the earlier advice that we gave on Councillor Kirby-Young's thoughtful suggestion about amendment, apparently it would not be possible to amend this motion because it's a motion to rescind. So it would be fundamentally out of order to amend a rescission at this point, the way you've proposed it. So it would have to be resubmitted as an entire new motion to address the kind of considerations that you were putting forward in your enactment clause. So we are all the way back to the motion as it was presented to rescind the resolution. And Councillor Swanson, just to be clear, because I know you were speaking to Councillor Kirby-Young's proposed tweak of rescission to amendment, and you're still on the speaking queue, Councillor Swanson. Did you want to speak to the original motion as presented, or? Still out of order. Just the two parts. I'm sorry, Councillor Swanson. My bad. Oh, there you go.
So just standing by what I said before and throwing in that if this does lower property values a bit, that's what we want, because that will make housing cheaper, and landlords will be able to build cheaper units and rent them at cheaper prices. So I think it's a good thing.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Swanson. And Councillor DiGenova.
Thanks so much. I was going to close on this, but considering all of the conversation and the fact that I think bringing land prices down does help. Maybe not for nonprofits, especially if it's BC Housing and others, but I have extensive background, and I'm not prepared to say that I know all about C2 zones. That's why I appreciate the consultation. That being said, I want to explain my intent. Given all of this information that we've received on amendments, and I had very thoroughly researched the process and appreciate very much the comments of staff, which were all incorporated into my motion. That being said, I would like to withdraw this because I understand that I cannot refer this. I can't really refer. It wouldn't be a proper process to refer a rescission to a planning process that's more appropriate. However, if I was to withdraw this, I could bring back something that did allow that, and we could refer consultation on C2 to the citywide plan. And hopefully then we can find out if that's right. If it would possibly, just as we're looking at all communities and neighborhoods throughout Vancouver, I think we really need to take a holistic approach to that. And that's just why I wanted to, and to quote Councillor Hardwick, press pause for a minute and stop and see what the unintended consequences are. And I think we've seen some of those consequences here. So for that reason, Council, I hope that you'll indulge me in a withdrawal with the understanding that that's my plan. I think we should explore Councillor Swanson's way forward and other ways forward that might come to us out of a citywide plan. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor DeGenova. Now I understand. So that's a motion to withdraw.
Yes.
I understand that would need a unanimous vote. That will require a unanimous vote. And I suppose if we vote on screen, that would indicate that we're unanimously voting. So the motion to withdraw the motion as presented by Councillor DeGenova, to withdraw the motion. Councillor Kirby-Young. Councillor Kirby-Young on the motion to withdraw. Okay, and that passes with nobody in opposition. So the motion is withdrawn. Folks, we have, I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to have a motion to extend past 5, but I'm going to pass over the chair to Chair DeGenova.
You want a motion? Motion?
We can do that when you come to the mic.
Yes. Just let me sign out here for one quick second. I don't log out here, I can't log in there. Let's do it. Okay, do I have, oh, just a moment. Okay, motion to adjourn? The standing committee? Thank you, Mayor Stewart. All in favor? Any opposed? With none opposed, over to you, Mayor Stewart, to reconvene in regular council.
Okay, thanks. So we're now reconvening in council to deal with the recommendations and actions from today's Standing Committee on City and Finances and Services meeting. We need a motion to adopt the agenda or the committee's recommendations. Thank you. Seconder? Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? It's good, that's passed. Thanks. We'll now deal with 2 unfinished items of business. First is declaring support for an East Side Arts District, which was moved and seconded by Councillor Fry. Is there any discussion? And if so, we'll have to... It's moved and seconded, of course, seconded by Councillor Weeb, and we already heard the speakers. So, Councillor DeGenova? I guess go ahead if you want to. I see you on the list there.
Oh, no,
Okay.
I haven't even logged in, Mayor Stewart.
Okay, so that's a holdover.
That must be Councillor
Councillor
Fry.
Kirby-Young, do you have anything on this one? Okay.
I think Councillor Fry is logged in as me right now, maybe.
Sure. Okay, thanks. So we could turn off Councillor DeGenova's microphone and give Councillor Kirby-Young up to 5 minutes. That's okay.
Thank you. I do stand in support of this motion. I have proposed an amendment, and it's a fairly simple one that I've sent to the clerk and to council. And that is simply the addition to Clause B to add the words to support the primary goal of combating the loss of artist production space. I think it's implied in some of the clauses, but I don't think it's explicit. And I really do want to ensure that we're very clear on what the primary goal is here. There's a lot of ancillary benefits that might come along with something like this, including tourism and placemaking and a number of other benefits. But I do want to really address sort of the very consistent finding that we found in the Making Room work that was done by Arts, Cultural and Community Services staff, and as well as the report that was commissioned and delivered by the Eastside Culture Crawl, and recognizing that this does come from the community, and it's sort of a direct lift of one of their strategies, which is leveraging City of Vancouver assets and establishing an Eastside Arts District. I just wanted to be clear on the purpose and the intent here, because there is a lot of other ancillary components and benefits, but in an effort to really direct the focus of the work that staff will undertake, I wanted to provide some explicit guidance on that, and that is the spirit of the amendment. Thank you.
I think I'm going to have to switch chairs. Okay. So we call a recess just for, can we? So we just take 3 minutes to allow us to shift. Okay. Thanks. We'll be right back. Oh, I think I'm ready to go. Okay. So we've got Councillor Dejanova. You said you weren't on the queue? Okay, Councillor Kirby-Young, you have anything else to say on this one? And we're a regular council now.
No, I've spoken to it, so I think we have the amendment on the floor now.
Okay, so I have a seconder for that one. Okay, thanks. Move over to the amendment queue. Councilor DeGenova, you needed 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate this amendment because I think that it really speaks to the reason that I understood the motion spoke to wanting an East Side Arts District. And, you know, as a resident of the East Side myself and someone who enjoys not only the East Van Culture Crawl, but art all throughout the city, I just want to be clear that even if there's a district, you know, there's art that we celebrate throughout our city. Just because Musqueam might not be located in what we call East Vancouver, I think that it's important to celebrate and recognize the art there, the Museum of Anthropology and art other places. That being said, the way that I read this motion, and I appreciate the clarification, and that's how I see this amendment, is the reasoning for this. And being that Councillor Fry and I both are liaisons to the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee, and recently with the support and the groundswell for Culture Shift, I think that it's very important that we talk about why we're doing this. Because we have nonprofits and other organizations that we simply can't help and we can't support in certain ways in our granting because there's too many of them. So for that reason, I think that it is important to say that this is, you know, the reason we're looking at this is to combat some of those affordability issues, to make sure that we welcome not only artists into our city, but give them places and spaces where they can work. And I can tell you that a number of nonprofit organizations that don't own their land don't get the property tax exemptions. As I've said so many times here, it's starting to sound like affordable home ownership when I bring it up. So maybe I'll come forward with something like that, but right now I'd be comfortable with this and moving forward, an East Side Arts District, but maybe we could look at, you know, some of the differences between the haves and the have-nots, the nonprofit organizations, some of those are arts organizations that own land, so they get property tax exemptions. Some of them rent and barely get by and have no assets and don't. So I appreciate Councillor Kirby-Young's amendment that truly helps us to realize why we would be supporting this, but I also think that it complements the motion that Councillor Fry has brought forward, which I think is something that we do need to consider, or else we're going to see art move further and further out in the region, just chasing the affordable space. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Fry?
Yeah, just really quickly speaking to the amendment, I was a little concerned at first, and I shared this with Councillor Kirby-Young, that the focus on artist production space may inadvertently preclude like gallery spaces and rehearsal spaces. But as I reread it, I think supporting the primary goal of combating the loss of artist production space works within the context and the intent of this motion, so I'm happy to support this amendment. And thanks, Councillor Kirby-Young, for your support of this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr?
Yes, very briefly, I'm supporting the amendment and just wanted to state why, which is the number of people that have come up to me to raise concerns about the loss of their production spaces. It happens regularly and is a source of great grief in the artist community, so I'm happy to see it very clearly defined. Yes, as a primary goal, there are other goals, but this is one I hear about all the time.
Thank you. Councillor Swanson?
Yeah, I support it too. This is a big issue, and I think it's really important to put the East Side Arts District group has done a great job too, and it's good to follow along what they've done and support them.
Okay, thanks. And that's it for the amendment, so we can call a vote. And that's passed. Thanks very much. Unanimously. So we'll go back to the main queue. Councillor Kirby-Young, anything else?
No, I'll wait till we speak to the main amendment.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Carr?
Yes, very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I'm rising very much in support of this motion. Thank Councillor Fry for his good work in this regard. I have met with members of that community. I know it's really important to them. I don't look at this as the only place in Vancouver, but I think that in many ways, we always need pilots or areas to get established first to see how it works, and then we can expand them to other parts of the city. So I think this is the Eastside Culture Crawl is like an institution and one of my favorite city events. So, it is a great place to start, but we do need to think that this will be the beginning of understanding how important this is, not just for that area, but for other areas too, where there are large concentration of art going on.
Thank you. Councillor Kirby-On.
Hi. Yeah, I'm very pleased to support this motion, and I'm glad to see it come forward. I reflect on art in the city, and I think that cities without vital, thriving arts scenes, and that means vital and thriving artists, is a bit like not having strawberries and cream together. If you try to think of all the great pairings, some might like that, some might not. But I think trying to speak to the point that it's very much something that contributes to the rich cultural fabric of our city and the quality of life in a great city. And Vancouver is really fortunate that we have so many artists per capita, but we won't be able to boast that for much longer with 400,000 square foot loss of studio space, which was articulated in the report that we got forward from the Eastside Culture Crawl Society, A City Without Art, and which was financially supported by the City of Vancouver as part of the work for the Making Space project and the broader work we're doing in the arts and culture sector. So I do think it's really critically important, and it is a recommendation that came forth from the community. And I think oftentimes those are the best ones, because when you have people that are living this each and every day and experiencing it, this is what the community said would make a difference to them and they need, and it was very clearly articulated in the City Without Art report that this would have significantly the most impact, in addition to obviously other things such as managing property taxes and as it related to policies around rezoning of industrial land and spaces. So I think it's a great step forward. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of it, and I appreciate the fact that we'll get an interim report back when we get those cultural updates later in this year in terms of pacing out the work. So I thank Councillor Fry for bringing it forward, and I'm very happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Weep.
I'll also be supportive, and I also, to Councillor Carr's comments, I do look at this as hopefully a catalyst for looking at what other areas and districts we can create and what the tools, so I'm really looking forward to what staff will bring back is kind of what is the regulatory framework, what are the policies and tools the City of Vancouver can use to really advance this work and really kind of bring the arts district up as kind of the forefront of Vancouver and support the art community. So I will be supportive. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Genova.
I'm not entirely convinced that this isn't just a little bit like Little Italy, which is that it's always been Little Italy and it just needed to officially become Little Italy. That being said, I'm fine with looking at an official designation because I would argue that there already is an alive and well and thriving arts district in East Van. And I also just wanted to, not to take anything away from Councillor Fry, but we were in an event earlier and former Councillor Elizabeth Ball was there. And she had put forward a motion that I know staff are working on. I told her, I assured her. And that was material for the arts, where people could use whatever it was, extra set materials, and recycle those to other organizations, maybe to help kids who don't have access to that, to help other artists, to really use that same model that we see in the Restore with Habitat for Humanity, maybe even for free. And I know our staff are undertaking that work and looking at it. And I just think that when we put all of these pieces together, how this can really not only help artists, but it will draw other artists who might not be coming to Vancouver because they can't currently afford it. I see our city already as a catalyst for that and for well-known artists, but I wonder what the potential will be if we're able to build that out. And I get really excited when I hear the arts and cultural community in Vancouver. But aside from that, even our own volunteers on the City of Vancouver Liaison Committee talk about that. So I appreciate the motion put forward by Councillor Fry. Happy to see some official designation for this, but I just wanted to state that I think that we already have a district that really does scream that East Van is a place that's thriving, and it's because of the artists who contribute to that. So for that reason, I certainly will be supporting it and appreciate Councillor Fry bringing this forward.
Sure. Orders first, I think. It's not, yeah, I think orders before privilege. Procedure. Yeah.
The meeting without a motion to extend, and so I'd like to move to extend to complete the business.
Okay, thanks very much. Seconder for
Second.
that? Okay, thanks. All in favor? Until we finish business? Yep. And any opposed? Good. Okay, thanks very much for that. Good save there. Councillor DeGenova.
No, that's what's all.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Fry.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor, and thanks, Council, for the support of this motion. Councillor DeGenova, I really appreciate the reference to Councillor Ball's, former Councillor Ball's motion. In fact, when I first moved to Princess and Cordova in the late 1980s, where the living room is now, was a place called the Imagination Market, and they used to recycle all this weird offcuts of industrial processes that artists would use and repurpose into artwork. It was the coolest space, and they'd always have different things rolling through there, and it was a really exciting spot, and I would love to see something like that come back. But, you know, also since I first moved into the neighborhood some 30-odd years ago, I've seen a lot of changes in the neighborhood. I've seen the culture crawl in particular grow from just a small collection of artist studios to a massive undertaking. And whereas the East Side may be informally our most creative district in the city, it's the formal designation will give it a little bit more protection that I think we really need to see happen, because we can recognize it as an informal place, we can love it and we can enjoy it, but until we actually act to protect it, it's going to be at risk, and it is at risk. And I really appreciate all the council moving forward on this assertion. And this does come with some financial considerations as well, because as we know, when we approved the new arterial at grade policy, we did put aside a little bit of money for some placemaking and public amenities and public good, and this could very well be a leverage point to allow some of the work that the East Side Culture Crawl Society has been doing to analyze the threats to cultural districts. And I think we can take this good work and expand it across the city. I was at a dinner party this weekend where members of Vivo, which is the Media Arts Center here in Vancouver, who they're about to leave because New West is aggressively courting artists in the Lower Mainland. And so if we start losing our artists to New West, then we're in big trouble. And I mean, New West is a lovely city, but I want to keep our arts here in Vancouver as well. So thank you for your support and consideration of this motion today.
Councillor Kirby? Nope. Okay, so that's it for the list. We can call a vote on this one then. That's passed unanimously. Thanks, Council. Okay, now we're moving on to the second item, which is the relief and rehabilitation of aggressive dog designation. And we heard speakers. Just if there's any discussion, please put yourself on the list. I've got Councillor Fry here. Reset your timer. Please go ahead, up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I submitted an amendment, which the clerks have. This based on a conversation with the Canadian Association of Veterinary Medicine, and in honesty, the omission of vets in the enactment clauses wasn't an intentional one. I was really just focusing on making sure that animal behaviorists were a professional classification as opposed to an internet certificate kind of outfit. So really, it's just the addition of veterinarians, as we heard from some of our expert legal and behaviorist presenters. It's an important component of animal aggression is identifying if there's a medical issue and if there's even pharmaceutical approaches that might be used to mitigate that behavior. So really this amendment is just to add veterinarian and or along with a professional animal behaviorist, and I decapitalized animal behaviorist as well.
Okay.
That's the amendment.
Thanks. Got a seconder for this one? Second. Okay, thanks, Councillor Carb. Over to the amendment queue. Anybody wish to speak to this amendment? Councillor DeGenova?
I was just wondering, Mr. Mayor, if through you, I could, sorry, Council, If through you I could ask Councillor Fry what the difference between a qualified and an unqualified veterinarian is.
Okay.
Because I understood a veterinarian to be a person with a degree.
Point of information?
I wasn't sure.
There you go. Councillor Fry, I've got you on the mic.
Studied animal medicine and have practiced it.
True, yeah, but not all veterinarians specialize in dogs. Some are horse veterinarians, some are specialized in birds, some don't really tackle behavioral issues. So it's really to just make sure that we're focusing on not a reptile vet, but a vet that specializes in canine behavior issues or canine medical issues.
Just further to that question, it doesn't say that a qualified veterinarian specialist that specializes in that. It says a qualified veterinarian.
It's a question.
I'm asking you, Mr. Mayor, if that's how staff would interpret it, because I
So
see.
you're asking staff now how they would
See up here, it's a qualified veterinarian. That's all it says.
how they would how staff would
Yeah,
interpret
because they're going to be the
qualified
ones.
veterinarian.
Yeah. I mean, if they
Perhaps I
see
can
that
ask the city manager then. A point of information: how staff would interpret a qualified veterinarian.
My sense through the chair is that as we got into implementing this, we would speak to specialists to establish criteria for what would be, how we would define a qualified veterinarian. Obviously, we would need to understand if there's certifications around certain behavioral issues that we would want to look for or other criteria, veterinarians that are trained in a specialty. So at this point, I'd say that gives us some latitude to establish criteria for who would fall into that bucket. Obviously, someone that specializes in marine mammals would probably not fall into that criteria, or other specializations that don't involve the types of animals we're talking about here.
Great.
Thanks. Just wanted to be clear on that.
Sure. You're good. Anything else?
Not on the amendment.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Weep.
Yeah, I'm supportive of the amendment, and I've heard from a few vets the importance of having regulated health professionals included in this to ensure that they're the ones doing the assessment as part of the motion. So I'm supportive of this and the motion as a whole. Thank you.
Thanks very much. No other speakers on the amendment, so we'll call a vote on that. And that's passed unanimously. Thanks. And sorry, I was on the main queue, councillors, so I'm going to the main queue where I have Councillor Fry. Is there anything?
Well, I'll come back on to speak to the.
Sorry. Oh, okay. So, Councillor DeGenova?
I just wanted to rise to say that I had some concerns about the cost that might surround this, and I, as someone who took care of my pets to the best of the extent of my ability, I had taken animals, actually cats, not dogs, to a behavioralist before, and it was quite expensive, especially when I was a university student. And I wonder if cost is going to be a barrier, and so socioeconomic factors will be a barrier. I know people who can't afford treatments for their dogs when it comes to the best of medical situations, and I think that it's so sad that it can be the difference between putting a dog down and getting the dog the proper treatment that the dog needs. And that or euthanasia based on someone's socioeconomic factor. I'm just concerned a little bit. I'm trying. Okay, Bernie Sanders. Maybe he wants to weigh in on this too. But just to finish my comments, I saw the value in it, but I also realized that it was a struggle at $500 an hour on top of the cost of medications. I just caution us to remember that I don't want to see this be something that only people who can afford to pay for it, that they're aggressive animals. And I'm not sure if that goes beyond dogs. I know we have an animal control bylaw, not specifically a dog control bylaw. And there are aggressive animals out there. I want to make sure that we're considering those people who just simply couldn't afford that. So those are my comments, and I'll listen carefully throughout the decision, but that's my only real concern with this motion. That being said, if staff are reporting back on that and Councillor Fry offers some comfort on how that will go in his comments, or where he may have found in the budget some money for that, then that might offer me a little more comfort. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Kirby-Young?
Yeah, I have a couple of clarification questions, if I could, through the chair to staff. For the city manager, and I had considered a number of amendments, but I honestly didn't want to get into rewriting it, so I'm just going to ask to see if I can get some comfort and clarification on the record. And the first one relates to Clause C, because there's two things here. There's the original determination of aggressive dog, and then there's the appeal. B speaks to the appeal, but C appears to speak to the original designation to me, and I'm wondering if city staff interpret that where it says a qualified annual behavior should be consulted, that would also be at the expense of an owner, not at the expense of the city, prior to the initial determination in Clause C?
Thanks, through the chair. I'm actually, I don't have an answer to that. I mean, my sense is staff need to get this, like if this is approved, we will go through this and come back with some, probably a memo or recommendations on how we could implement this. So, and staff haven't gone through it in detail. So at this point, I'm not totally clear.
Okay, I wasn't either, so thank you. My second clarification question really relates to sort of the juxtaposition between D&E and F, because D&E are very prescriptive in preparing bylaw language versus F that says support back with recommendations. And so my question to staff is, do you consider that you'll be providing recommendations and bylaw language at the same time, or do you feel that the way this is written now, you have latitude to come back with recommendations as opposed to being specifically directed that this bylaw should be, council's intent is to move forward with this bylaw and we want the exact language, or are we going to get recommendations coming forward first of any considerations? Or does staff feel they have latitude to include recommendations and make some amendments based on that discovery process, if you will?
Yeah, thanks. Through the chair. I think what we would try to do is to look through this, kind of the intent of what council's directing us to do, and come back with recommendations of how best it could be structured within the kind of the context of the way that we work, and engaging with law and with the folks that are on the ground implementing this. And so to try to come back with some recommendations as well as some language for how you could implement, how we could implement it. So kind of a combination of the two. I wouldn't see it as we have to go back and implement exactly what's in here. Like we need to get the intent of what council's directing us to do and see how we can best implement it with changes to the bylaws.
Okay. That's helpful. Maybe with the chair, I can just use my time to provide now the rest of my time comments on the motion. So I will support at this point. I'm very supportive of the concept of providing an avenue for rehabilitation versus simply punishment, which I think is the true spirit and intent of this, and consistent with what some of the other municipalities have done. What I want to do is similar to the previous discussion we had, is provide the room for a good process to come back to council with recommendations and not explicitly the bylaw. So rather than rewrite it, which I didn't do, but I was troubled by sort of the language and it being a bit prescriptive, based on the responses from the city manager, I am comfortable supporting it because I think the intent is quite clear. And I do think that if there's anything that pops up that staff feel is problematic or is beneficial to consider in a possible change to the bylaw, that council will get that back. So for that reason, I will support it. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Swanson.
Yeah, I like Councillor DeGenova. The only problem I have is it looks like if you're a poor person and you have an aggressive dog, you'll have a chance of it being helped. And if you're a rich person and have an aggressive dog, you can probably pay for it. So it's better, I guess, to save some dogs rather than no dogs. So I'll be voting for it, but I hope that we can give it some more consideration, figure out how we can make sure that all the dogs get the training that could be useful in making them less aggressive.
Thank you. Councillor Fry?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And I just want to quickly reflect on the low-income component because I hear you both. And you'll be happy to know that Councillor Wiebe and I have been talking about our next suite of animal control bylaw reforms. One of the things that we have learned in speaking to animal control is that a disproportionate amount of low-income people end up having their dogs seized and impounded. And in fact, we no longer allow discretion to the animal control bylaw officers to waive those fines. And in many cases, people are choosing to go homeless rather than lose their dog. So they can pay these fines, or sex work or criminal activities. So we recognize that there's a big equity issue with this particular file, and that's something that we'll be hopefully looking at in the not very distant future. I also want to just reference that there are a ton of great groups out there that volunteer to raise money, and there's all sorts of animal issues tend to really draw a lot of financial support, and I feel confident that we will not see low-income people disproportionately punished through this law, but I think that definitely that's something that we need to look at. I also want to just reference really quickly that the bylaw in question is an aggressive dog bylaw. It's not an aggressive animal bylaw. It's the animal control bylaws, but the designation is specifically aggressive dog. And when it comes to costs, I just want to reference also that in many of these cases, the cost of impounding a dog is not borne by the dog owner. It's borne by the taxpayers of Vancouver. So if a dog is in appeal, if a dog is designated aggressive, and a dog is impounded, those costs are actually borne by the Vancouverites. And I think what is important to contextualize here is that when we deem a dog aggressive and we say that dog needs to be muzzled and that dog needs to be isolated, we're not doing anything to address the behavior issues. So that's only as good as the retention of that dog and the muzzle are. And if the dog gets out, the dog has not been socialized. If the dog doesn't have its muzzle and bites, it hasn't been socialized. So there's a real positive direction to take this and actually really work on sort of behavior, just reforming behavior. And as I'm fond of telling the last couple of radio shows that I did, I mean, I think we really need to start looking towards not licensing dogs, but licensing dog owners, and actually having a more sort of thoughtful approach to how the responsibilities of pet guardianship in the city of Vancouver could be, and what our obligations are, be it picking up the turd or making sure your dog is well enough trained. There's a responsibility to having a pet in the city, and I think that should be our future focus. I think this is a step in that right direction, and I think, I hope that I have your support, because I think this is a progressive way to go for the city of Vancouver and for the dogs that call Vancouver their home. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Dejanova?
Yeah, I have an amendment I'm putting forward.
Okay.
With
Got about 2 minutes left.
yeah. Okay, send it over now. And I just thought that it should be clear that it's in here. So I'm sending it over, and I hope, Mr. Mayor, if I think there's one word that I think behavioralist in my motion actually maybe spelled incorrectly, but I wanted to get it over there. I think that I've included an extra U. I wanted to make sure that there was something in this motion that did talk about the socioeconomic factors and people being able to afford this, and just asking staff to consider that in their work with this motion, and that they report back with any findings that they're going to report back with, including options and considerations for people who might not be able to afford a veterinarian or behavioralists to look at their animal. I know that behavioralists are few and far between in the city of Vancouver. I think 7 a speaker spoke to in the region. but I think the region is far and wide, might even go beyond the Lower Mainland. So for that reason, and in doing some research, I think that it's really important that it's not, it isn't just the animals of people who can pay that are saved, and I think that that speaks to the compassion that came forward in this motion. So I certainly will be able to support it, and even more enthusiastically if this is included. Thank you.
Thanks. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Fry, over to the amendment queue. Clear the queue. Does anybody wish to speak to this amendment? Councillor Fry.
Yeah, happy to support this amendment. I just want to submit an amendment to the amendment just so it's consistent with the rest of the language, and it's behaviorist rather than behavioralist. Or can you guys just handle it from? Okay, then no need for an amendment to the amendment. It's good to go. Happy to support. Thank you, Councillor DeGenova.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Young.
I have some concerns about this because I appreciate sort of the equity approach and the equity piece, but I also think that unless we're going to find services, sort of animal support NGOs or qualified veterinarians that are willing to donate their time potentially to folks, that it's fairly likely option that one of those strong recommendations would be that the city take on the costs for that. And I know we have a motion coming up next week around budget and around trying to limit our property tax increase, I think put forward by Mayor Stewart to no more than 5%. But it concerns me that we're just bringing forward motions that potentially add additional cost. And council's going to have some tough decisions to make around trying to deliver on some of our core services. So I'm trying to look at all of the motions that we have through that lens moving forward, because we passed a slew of them last year that had significant price tags attached to them, and every bit adds up. So I do have concerns about this.
You, Councillor DeGenova.
Just wanted to, in closing, thank Councillor Fry for seconding and supporting this. And to Councillor Kirby-Young's point, yes, I anticipate there being some issues with cost too, but I'd rather be upfront, transparent, and take accountability for any inequity and look at that on the floor of council. Maybe this also, in directing staff to look at options, will help them to find NGOs that might be able to help with this cost so that when they come back to us, and if there's an amendment in there, it's not that that work hasn't been undertaken and done. Again, this is just something they're coming back to us with. And I wouldn't put this forward as a separate motion, although I would like to see a therapy dog in here maybe one day. Those dogs that came in with the speakers were absolutely adorable. But I have to say that I think that it's really, really important that we anticipate those costs ahead of time and give staff as clear direction as we possibly can, or it's unfair to them in the motion process and in asking them to report back. So I'm not asking council to make a decision. I'm asking council to direct staff to go out and see what the possibilities are. Maybe there are options out there with nonprofits, other levels of government that we're not aware of. So let's see what pans out and have that come back, since the rest of this is going to come back anyways. Seems. Thanks.
Thank you. Call the vote on this one. And Councillor Kirby-Young in opposition, everyone in favor. So that's passed. Thank you. Go back to the main queue. Councillor DeGenova, anything else?
No.
Okay. Councillor Kirby-Young, you have 1 minute and 15 seconds. Nope. Okay. So that's it. We'll call a vote on this one then. And that's passed unanimously. Thanks, Council. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you. Two. I see the two takers over there. So all in favor? Any opposed? Nope, that's passed. Thanks very much. We're adjourned, Council. Thank you.